Are some people just born with the ability to see spirits from an early age while others are not? Are these people faced with the frightening reality of having entities torment them in the night? Do certain people act like a beacon to ghosts and spirits and experience paranormal activity all their life? And how do these people learn to cope with such frightening activity? My next guest, Nate Michael, author of his debut book, Born Haunted, My Lifelong Encounters with the Paranormal, joins me to talk about his frightening encounters in the paranormal. Well, greetings, fellow truth seekers, and welcome once again to Passion for the Paranormal, bringing a passion for the paranormal to you. I'm so excited to be back here with you once again for another great episode, this time coming up on Halloween. I've got a special guest with me tonight. He is first-time author Nate Michael, and Nate's going to be sharing with me his lifelong experiences with the paranormal and talking about some stories from his book. It's great to have him joining me, especially just right before Halloween here. Should be some spooky stories for Nate to tell us. Okay, so if you haven't been over to the website yet, please visit us at passion4theparanormal.com, and there make sure you sign up to receive our newsletter. And you can catch up with some past episodes there. You can also check out some cool Passion for the Paranormal merchandise. We're also on Facebook at facebook.com/passion4 the paranormal. If you head over to Facebook, please make sure you like and follow us there. And if you know of a friend, family member, or coworker you think that would be interested in checking out the show, please share that link with them. Appreciate it. And whatever podcast app you're using out there, please just make sure you hit that subscribe button. And without further ado, I'm going to launch into this discussion with Nate. And hopefully it's going to be some spooky stories, and really looking forward to the discussion with Nate. And thank you so much for tuning in. Okay, so happy Halloween, everybody. My guest tonight is Nate Michael. And Nate recently published his debut book, Born Haunted, My Lifelong Encounters with the Paranormal. Nate works in the medical field and gained his medical certification through Ivy Tech Community College. And as a result of his lifelong experiences with the supernatural and paranormal, considers himself knowledgeable on paranormal phenomena and the occult. He's joining me tonight to share some of the stories about his paranormal experiences as he is documented in his new book. Nate, thank you so much for joining me on the show tonight.
Thank you for having me, Curry. I appreciate it, and thank you to all the listeners out there.
Yeah, it's an interesting book, Nate. I did not get a chance to read through the entire book, kind of just perused through some of the stories, and it was quite interesting what I did get a chance to read through, and I want to get into some of those stories. Here we are coming up on Halloween, and wow, seems like some really fascinating experiences. Not only fascinating, but also frightening experiences that you dealt with over your the course of your life. But maybe you could take us back to how this all kind of started for you. Take us back to where this kind of started.
Sure. So this began as far back as my memory could serve me. Approximately 4 or 5 years old is when I first began experiencing or remembering those experiences. My mother often talked about experiences she had when she would hold me as an infant, rocking me to sleep at night, things like that. But about 4 to 5 years old is when I encountered some of these entities, and from what I can remember on today.
Now, the interesting thing is that first story, that first introduction, you talk about, something coming out of the closet, some sort of entity. And then, you get into it really right away. You're talking to your parents and you say, I am experiencing something scary in my closet. And then you say what?
So the entity that was in my closet, it had actually come out one evening, and either through me, telling it to leave or something, asking it what it was, when I finally reached my breaking point with it, it actually said, I'm an evil spirit.
Wow. And now, did you Did this entity, were you getting messages from it? Was it talking to you, saying things to you regularly? This entity that you first mentioned?
So it was something that I experienced for quite some time. It would call my name out. I would hear things about coming into the closet, opening the door, and it went on so long and so frequent. I began to sleep on the living room floor, the living room couch, anywhere but my room. And being young, 5 years old or so, my parents wanted me to sleep in my room and stay there throughout the night. So they eventually took me to my pediatrician, and on his advice, he advised to put me in my room at night and shut the door. And every time that I would come out, to put me back in my room and shut the door. So it was something I was dealing with for quite some time.
Interesting. Now, the other thing is did your parents, now they kind of just thought this was your imagination at first, right? I mean, that weren't you kind of dealing with that as well?
Yeah, I mean, being a younger kid, and I have a young daughter myself, so you try to rationalize some things, and kids' imaginations, they get away from them. So you try to rationalize it and justify it, and but there were some experiences that they had, my parents had, that really, I think it brought it to their attention, and it made them believe my claims much more.
Now, Nate, what age were you when you first started experiencing this?
I was about 4 to 5 years old, from what I can remember, though it had gone back to when I was an infant.
Wow. So and these experiences were going on how often? I mean, was this like a nightly thing going on, or was it happening kind of, it would start maybe one night or happen one night and then it would go away for a little bit and come back a week or two or month later? I mean, how often were you having these experiences?
It was near nightly. I would not sleep in my bedroom, so I would sleep on the couch, the living room floor, and this would occur nearly every night.
And you said now you mentioned your parents had experiences. So they actually had experiences in this house prior to you starting to have these frightening experiences yourself.
Yeah, they had, some things that you try to rationalize, door closings, doors opening, and lights being on after they had clearly shut them and locked them. And there was one instance that really stands out in my mind, after I had brought up, what this entity was or what it claimed it told me it was. One evening, late evening, my mother was getting out of bed and used the bathroom, and she noticed some uh, fog on the window pane above our front door, just a small little window pane. And it kind of caught her attention, and she walked over to it. And written in the fog of that window pane was an expletive word.
Wow, and that's quite frightening. Now, how long did this continue to go on before? Now, I mean, was this before your parents really started to take notice and realize that they needed to do something about it? I mean, did this go on for a long period of time before they really took notice about this? Help us understand time frame wise how long that took.
Yeah, it took quite some time. I mean, again, they were, I wouldn't say skeptical, but being parents, trying to rationalize it at first. So, I mean, this was over the course of 4 or 5 years, and they really, I guess, began to believe my claims more after the word was written in the window. We had come home one evening from some shopping, and all the doors on the home, every door was open, all the lights were on, and they had actually called the police because we had obviously thought there was an intruder, but there was no sign of intruder. So that's when they really started to believe, what I was experiencing was true and was real.
Wow. And so you're having these experiences now. Have you continued to have experiences throughout your life?
Yes, I had. So actually, when we moved out of that home, shortly after my sister was born, and my mother was having a lot of nightmares about my newborn sister, we had moved out of that home, and at first everything seemed fine, and we weren't having any experiences. But then shortly after moving into the second home, we had experiences there as well.
Wow, so this kind of continued on. Any reason to believe that it had something to do with the home, or do you think this is just this entity or this activity is just kind of following you and your family?
I think that it may be more drawn to myself. I feel I'm a little bit sensitive to those things and receptive to the paranormal and spirits and things like that. But in the second home, I believe it was focused in the home. It was there. Um, I don't know so much about the first home. I believe that might have been something that was drawn to me when I was young. But the second home, it was something that was there um, and resided there. We believe.
Now, getting back to your experiences at a very young age in that first home, what was it? I mean, I'm sure you had to have gotten to a certain point, or your parents had to have gotten to a certain point where they kind of said, "There's something we've got to do here." What was that point, and how did you guys kind of try to deal with the activity that you were experiencing in that first home?
So I have to say, I mean, it was the early 1980s. So I don't believe that paranormal activity was well received at that time or talked about as much as we do today. So I think the tipping point was, after the word was written in the window, on the inside of the window, that no one in our home had done that, and then having all the doors open and all the lights on. Um, and then the multiple nightmares that my mother would have and I would have as well, featuring my newborn sister. I think that was when they said enough is enough and we got to get out of here. But again, being in the 1980s, it just wasn't something to be talked about, or people didn't share that information as much.
Now, this entity, did it show itself to you? Was it more of a shadow looking entity? Did you actually see, maybe what some might call a full body apparition? Can you talk about maybe what you were seeing?
Yeah, it was always presented itself as a dark mass, like a shadow, only darker. You couldn't see through it whatsoever. Uh, an outline of a person, of a figure, a tall figure, um, and it would always seem to snake its way underneath the door. And that's about the point where I would run out of my room for the night and then sleep on the couch.
Wow. Any types of physical attacks that you remember? Anything physical at all with this entity in the first house?
Nothing physical that I can remember. Again, it was just a lot of the doors closing, doors being opened, the bad word written in the window, just a lot of that stuff, but nothing physical that I recall.
Yeah, and this is kind of the interesting part of paranormal activity, and how do you classify it? Obviously, from what you've said so far, this would be, I think, what many would term an intelligent haunting. Sounds like
Absolutely.
obviously it knew who you were, that was interacting with you. Is there, I mean, would you say you mentioned that it said that it was an evil spirit. Is there anything else, that you could kind of hang your hat on to say, well, potentially, I think you mentioned demonic in the book, that perhaps this was demonic activity? Anything else going on in that first house that would really lead you to believe, definitively that this was demonic?
The continual dreams that my mother had of my sister, her newborn daughter, being drugged in that closet, and then her scream stopping, and my mother realizing, what that meant. Um, it certainly, I don't think, was a friendly entity. I don't I don't know that it was fully demonic, but it was absolutely presenting itself in a negative manner.
Yeah, you kind of wonder when these kinds of things happen, could it be something that, maybe, was living at some point? Maybe, I mean, are we talking about an old home? Are we talking about a newer home? Maybe give us an idea in terms of the home and, Was it, I mean, we were talking about a fairly old home or a newer home?
No, it was fairly new. I mean, it was built around 1970s. The land dates back quite some time, but no, it was a fairly new home.
And how long had you and your family stayed in that home before you eventually decided to move?
It was probably a good total 6, 7 years.
Okay, so you were experiencing activity for a long period of time. Was there ever a point where it kind of subsided? Was there certain things that you did in the home where the activity would pick up? Just kind of trying to get a sense for, where there was what may have been impacting activity in the house. Nate, are you with me or did I lose you there? All right, so I wanted to get back to the question I was asking you about the activity going on in the home. And, it went on for kind of a long period of time. I think you said 6 to 7 years this activity was going on. Did you happen to notice anything that would heighten the activity, anything you were doing, your family was doing that may trigger the activity or increase or make the activity a little bit more prevalent?
Nothing that comes to mind. I wonder though. I often wonder if it was my continual mentioning of it and allowing it to scare me so much. If that maybe it didn't feed off that.
Yeah, no, and you mentioned that you really didn't talk to anybody else about this. I mean, this is a different time. I think the good news is nowadays people seem to be more open to talking about this. I mean, we have paranormal shows on TV. There's a lot of paranormal groups out there. I mean, this is really, the whole interest in paranormal phenomena has grown immensely over the last, 20, 30 years. But going back to this time, we're talking about the 80s, and people weren't as open to this. I mean, was this something that you and your family pretty much kept quiet and tried to deal with on your own?
Yes, absolutely. We did not share it outside of outside our direct family members whatsoever. Anytime you would kind of bring up the topic, I mean, you would be quickly, dismissed and frowned upon. But so we kept it in the family. It actually, I didn't begin to discuss these experiences until I met my wife. So it was definitely something we buried and kept secret, if you will.
Yeah, it's and that makes sense. Like you said, we in the '80s it was a different time, and yeah, you had to deal with the kind of the blowback from people. I mean, if you talked about this stuff, a lot of people might kind of look at you like you have a third eye, or that it was kind of taboo conversation more back then, I think.
Oh,
Now it
absolutely.
nowadays the good thing is it's I think people are seem to be much more open to talking about this kind of stuff. Whether it's UFOs, cryptids, haunted activity, any kind of unexplained type of phenomena, people seem to be just in general more open to talking about it. But I think that's partly because of the growth of paranormal shows, and now there's thousands and thousands of paranormal groups out there involved in doing this. You see it on social media everywhere. It's much easier to talk about now. So you decide to move out of the house, and I think you pick up in the book a few chapters later where the activity starts up again in the new home. Now you move into the new home. How long does it take before you start experiencing activity in the second home?
It was fairly quick. I would say within the first month of living there. The first few weeks were fine and everything seemed to be normal. But it was definitely within the first month that the activity began.
And now, is the activity once again centered around you? Are you experiencing the activity? Give us a feel or a sense for what's going on and what's happening in the home and how the activity is happening.
Sure. So at that point, again, my younger sister was born, and she was young. So it was affecting everyone in the second home. There was a lot of door closing. Um, the basement door would always be open after we would close it. One frequent thing that would happen would be the toilet paper in the bathrooms would be completely unrolled and then folded up into neat little piles sitting right by the toilet. And that happened all the time. Um, I had a lot of, seeing what looked like faces out of the corner of my eye, in areas of the home where there couldn't have been someone standing on a second story window. Um, so a lot of that kind of stuff. I began talking with imaginary friends at that age and at that time, and I believe that they were real. I still do believe that they were real. So a lot of that kind of stuff.
Now that these were entities that you were seeing, and no one else was seeing in the home.
Yes. So the imaginary friends were, no one else saw them until my sister grew a few years older. She actually began to play with them as well. She would play with them when I wasn't around, but it started out with just me seeing the imaginary friends.
Talk to us. I know there's a lot of experiences you share in the book. Obviously, having something come out of the closet is got to be remarkably disturbing, and to be experiencing that at such a young age would be, I can only the only word I can think of is just terrifying. I can only imagine. Now, when we're at a young age, it's certainly understandable how your parents could say, well, kids are afraid of the dark and they have overactive imaginations, and it's certainly understandable how they could, kind of initially draw that conclusion in terms of what, activity was going on. But aside from the mention of the closet and the entity there, is there an experience that you've obviously had this your entire life? Is there really an experience that really sticks out with you that was, horribly frightening, especially later on, that just absolutely terrified you to the bone?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's an experience that I had never told anyone other than my mother and father, up until the release of the book, until I published the book. My wife actually read about this experience for the first time, and she couldn't believe I never told her. So, in that second home, one evening I was in the basement playing on an old computer, one of those old Mac computers, and I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. And I looked up, and it wasn't mom or dad. And I kind of got the inkling of what it probably was. It was probably some spirit. But I continued on the computer, and then I heard the footsteps coming, in the basement room, and I freaked out and jumped into a pile of dirty laundry that was on the floor and covered myself up, making a little fort, if you will, to protect me from whatever was walking down the stairs. And then we had a box of Halloween decorations sitting in the corner of the basement. And I remember very vividly that the box being shuffled around, and the contents of the box, you could hear it moving as if something was looking for something. Um, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. And out of that box, I saw a mask. It was a witch mask, and it just floated to where I was hiding, and it lowered itself down. There was no arms, no body, just the mask that was in the box that floated over, and it said to me, "Do you know my name? Because I know yours." And then it fell to the ground. And to this day, I mean, it just gives me goosebumps in talking about it. It really terrifies me.
Wow. Wow. Now, what other kinds of things? I know you mentioned you had your name called. Now, I think in the paranormal field, we refer to these as disembodied voices. Were you getting other kinds of messages, perhaps negative type messages, relayed to you when you were having these paranormal experiences?
I would have a lot of nightmares, as well as some of my other immediate family members that were in the home. They would have nightmares as well about unfortunate events that would later come to be true, murders in the area, accidents in the area, and things like that. But in regards to any other negative messages, no, not in that home.
Now, would you hear voices? Would you hear unintelligible type voices? I mean, were you hearing other types of disembodied voices, that sort of thing? Was that going on in the home?
Yeah, I would often hear my name being called out. I would think it was my mother. I'd run upstairs and she wasn't up there, and she'd actually be outside. Uh, you would hear a lot of that, your name being called and from another room or something.
So yeah, and it's interesting because I've had other guests on the show where we've had the discussion about whether they're psychics, mediums, sensitives, why perhaps they get these messages where others don't. Do you kind of have a sense for why you are having these experiences? I mean, have you kind of stepped back and said, I wonder why me? And have you kind of tried to answer that question for yourself, why you're having these experiences?
Sure, and I think that's something that anyone who has those experiences does. Why am I having this? Why me? Why why not somebody else? Why is it me? And for me, I think it may attribute to being sensitive to this phenomena, and more receptive to it, and maybe even having more so an open mind to it. So I think that's why it may affect me more. But on the grander scale of things, looking back, I'm kind of I feel grateful because it's changed how I look at life and some of my personal viewpoints and beliefs on life and in the afterlife.
Yeah, and that's a good segue, Nate. I wanted to ask this question because you talk about it early on in the book and kind of this, profound spiritual transformation, if you will, you've kind of had as a result of your experiences. Talk a little bit about, you mentioned this spiritual experience you had, where you were kind of shown this connection between birth and death that you talk about in the book. Can you share what that was and how that kind of unfolded for you?
Yeah, so that really came about when I first got started in the medical field. Um, I had worked in a nursing home, so I was around a lot of death. I was seeing a lot of the residents pass on, and they would always claim a light at the end of the tunnel. Nearly every patient that was going through the death process would claim this, and it's something you take note of, and you think that it's interesting, and you kind of remember that. So a few years after having these experiences, I was hired in at a local hospital, and there was someone there that was passing away, and they were claiming a white light at the end of the tunnel. While down the hall in the birthing unit, there was a child being born, and the person that was dying, passing away, was talking about a doctor that was in the birthing room. And that's kind of the moment for me where it just all came together, and I was like, the white light at the end of the tunnel. The white light is the light of coming out, of being born, and they were describing the birthing room.
Now, you also, I think, mentioned in the book when you were working in the hospital, you were, dealing with patients again that were just about ready to pass on. Talk about this now. You mentioned something about them seeing other family members. Was that something that was shared with you for by multiple patients?
Oh, nearly every one. They would, at the time of death, nearly always talk about seeing a loved one, a mother, father, a wife, brother, sister, whoever was very close to them in life that had passed on before they did. And they would claim seeing them at the foot of their bed, or hovering, above their bed. And oftentimes they would say that these deceased family members were giving them positive messages that it's okay and everything's going to be okay, and those kinds of things.
Interesting. Yeah, and that does seem to be a recurring theme for people who are, just about to that point where they're ready to pass on. I've heard that multiple times too, that sometimes they see family members there already ready to greet them before they pass on to the other side. But kind of what's the bigger picture you see in the afterlife here you've gained as a result of these experiences and that spiritual experience you had?
So I think the bigger picture for me is that where death isn't the end. It really may be the beginning, and science really says it best. Energy is never created, nor is it destroyed. It's simply transferred. And human beings are completely just full of energy. I mean, that's the whole human body is comprised of energy. So where does that go? And personally, for me, the bigger picture, I think that it does continue on, and we may be rebirth in a sense.
So is this kind of along the lines of a reincarnation type theory or belief based on your...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I feel. I mean, based on my experiences and my beliefs, and it gives me comfort to know that as well. So, yeah, I do believe it's a form of reincarnation.
Yeah, talk about this. This was a spiritual journey, obviously, for you. Having all these experiences, it seems you kind of the bigger picture is that you kind of came to terms with this, if you will, and perhaps you started to think maybe there was a reason this was happening. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back, I think that it did happen for a reason. It wouldn't had I not had those experiences, as well as working in healthcare and having the opportunity to be by patients as they pass. Um, it definitely has shaped a lot of my beliefs and just everything that I believe in.
Now, talk a little bit about you've gained some interest in the occult as a result of your experiences. Talk a little bit about that and that journey for you.
So after meeting my wife, at the time fiance, we moved in together. We had experienced some significant paranormal activity in our first home living together. That once that resolved, that led to a great interest in it instead of a fear of the paranormal, and I began to read and research more of it, which led me to some other schools of thought and other schools of belief and religion. Um, and so I began to research those areas as well.
Interesting. Now, it sounds like you also practice Wicca,
Yes.
and I think this is kind of part of that spiritual journey that you're talking about here. Talk a little
Yes.
bit about that and what that means for you.
I kind of made this connection and discovered this reincarnation idea. I um, I had a lot of those beliefs and I kept them inside, and I didn't know what to do with them. So I began to look for, you know, is there anybody else that thinks the way I do? Is there anybody else that feels that we are just energy, and when we pass on, it's a form of reincarnation. And as I began to research these thoughts I was having more and more, I discovered it aligned with Wicca. And the more that I read about Wicca, the more I realized it's actually not what a lot of folks believe it is. And it's actually quite peaceful. And again, it aligned perfectly with what I was thinking and the thoughts I was having and feeling.
Interesting. So, is this something you practice today? Are you, is it a regular kind of, but I mean, is it something as a result of your journey that you are still practicing today?
Yes, it's something I do every day. It's something I incorporate into my everyday life, into my everyday interactions with folks. Again, it's a very peaceful practice, and it promotes positivity, and it promotes love, and it promotes happiness. And so I think that it's a great thing, and I really try to work that into my daily routine and in my daily being.
Interesting. Now, Nate, you are, obviously you mentioned in the book you've had lifelong paranormal experiences. Now, present day, take us to present day. Are you still having these kinds of experiences, or have they kind of subsided? Kind of where are you at right now with, having these experiences?
So I mentioned when I first met my wife, we had moved in together. We had had some experiences, some quite significant experiences. But currently, no, I don't have any current experiences with the paranormal. I still run into things. For instance, where my wife works, she works at a bar. It's an older building. It seems every time I go in there, I get very emotional, and that's kind of my signal to me that there's a spirit or ghost nearby. So you run into those things. I think they're everywhere. Personally, I think they're all around us in different locations. So yeah, I do run into them. However, it's not something that's in my home currently affecting me today.
Yeah, and that's fascinating because it seems when your view kind of has shifted on this, where you kind of seen this as more of a, maybe say more of a positive experience.
Yes,
Is
absolutely.
that kind of when the activity started to lessen, or you noticed that it just wasn't really occurring as much?
Yeah, I would say it did. After my wife and I moved out of that home where we were having experiences together, when I started to research and I came more to terms with the paranormal and these experiences, I would say that's when it did kind of subside. And again, I still run into it, but it's not active in my home. So
Now, you and your wife had experiences together. Was this something your wife was experiencing before you met, or was this something that the two of you started experiencing after you were together?
no, it was something she began experiencing after we were together. She actually was quite skeptical until we had moved in together. And frankly, I never told her about my experiences uh, when I was younger until we moved in and we were having shared experiences in the home.
Now, talk about some of those experiences. Were any of these negative, or what kind of experiences were you guys having together?
So when we first moved into this rental home, there was just a heavy fog in the air. There was just, an invisible fog, but it was just a heaviness. You could feel it. So it started out with that. Um, we heard some footsteps, but you kind of dismissed those things. It's a new house. We just moved in. A lot of items missing or misplaced. My wife would, where's the hairbrush that she just had in her hand? And she turned around and it was gone. A lot of those kind of things. It escalated into scratching inside the walls. We would hear a lot of scratching in the walls. We called the landlord, and he would come out. Every time he would come out, it would stop as soon as he pulled in the drive. And he told us, if you guys weren't such good tenants and you have good upkeep on the place and you always pay the rent, I wouldn't believe you. But there's just nothing he could do because he couldn't witness it for himself. It escalated from there, but that's where it started.
Now, you actually share an experience you had in the home with your wife that you referred to, and there's a chapter dedicated to it that you referred to as a possession experience. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, I believe it was a possession experience. I was becoming, as we were having more paranormal activity increase in the home, I was becoming obsessed with the home, researching it, and going to the library and looking up information on the home and looking up the maps and the details of the land and events that had occurred there that might be contributing to this activity. One evening, my wife was working, and I got the inkling to go to the basement. I needed to go to the basement. And when I went down to the basement, I completely blacked out. And my wife had come home in the meantime. She was fiance then. She had come home and she could tell something was off. All the lights were off in the home. It was something was just wrong. She walked in and she noticed that I wasn't upstairs. So she went downstairs to look for me. And she saw me sitting down on the basement floor with just a light of a single candle, and she said, "What the hell is going on?" And she said, my facial expression just wasn't me. My face was contorted in an odd form, and she could just tell it was not me. And she actually asked, "Who the hell are you?" And something came through my mouth, a voice that wasn't mine, in an accent that wasn't mine. And it told her not to worry about me, that I would be okay. However, it was evil and it is destruction. And all I can really remember is waking up and her telling me that. My wife was hovering over me, and I had come to, and I said, I'm sorry, I must have fell asleep. I didn't know you came home. And she said, honey, you were possessed.
Wow, and this Nate, this begs the question: when you have something like that happen, which sounds pretty frightening, by the way, uh, how do you kind of cope with that, or how do you come to terms with that? Was there any other kind of experiences? Because some people may lead people down the road to the dark or the demonic kind of activity, or is it something just really trying to scare you? That's kind of where when you have some kind of activity that happens like that, you have to wonder, could this be demonic? Could this just be something that's trying to scare us? But how do you guys kind of sort through that and work through that?
You know, God love my wife. She's a tough woman, so that was tough on her, and it was tough on me as well. We decided to move out after that event. We were going to break the lease of the rental house and move out. It was something we weren't going to deal with. Um, it's frightening, and whether it was truly demonic or just trying to be scary, it was enough for us that we were done. We weren't going to entertain it any longer. We weren't going to be there and find out what would happen next.
Yeah, see, that's the interesting thing because you've had these experiences throughout your life. Did you often wonder if it had anything to do with the house or if it was really something uh, attached to you or just affecting you?
So in my research, I believe that it was something with the land, possibly that house that my wife and I were renting. Based on my research, there was a lot of negative things that had happened on the land and in the house as well. Um, the land that the house sat on uh, was originally part of a fort back in the 1700s, and in my research and visiting the local library and comparing, you know, current map to where the historical maps of where the house would have sat, it actually aligned perfectly with the words Indian hanging ground. I believe that may be a huge contributing factor to why we were experiencing some of the darker, if you will, haunting in that home. I had also uncovered in my research that there was a murder that took place in the house in I believe it was the mid 90s, where a family member, had brutally shot four of his family members in the home. Um, so I think that was a big contributing factor. I think that maybe a lot of negative things happened on the land and in the house, and that contributes to the haunting and the style of haunting.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't mean to make
No,
light of the
no, it's okay. No,
of that history, but it does it begs the question. I mean, is this kind of stuff is just not stuff that landlords or
right,
that they share
exactly,
with people, right? I mean, you had to do your own research to uncover that had happened. Is that correct?
exactly. And even if you would bring it up to how do you bring it up to the landlord? You say, I think this house is haunted. He's going to laugh at you, and he's going to tell you no. He wants your money. So, no, I totally agree with you. It is something that doesn't get shared very often to people. It's interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, it's if somebody's trying to rent their home. Is that probably one of the first things they're going to want to tell you? Oh, by the way, there was a, quadruple homicide that happened in this home, and you may want to think about that before you decide to rent here. That's probably
Exactly.
not something they're going to share with you, or they're probably not going to. A lot of people are going to say, as soon as they hear that, they're probably going to say, "Well, we're going to look around a little bit."
Exactly.
But
Exactly.
and that's interesting that you had to actually research that to find that out. Is that something you shared with the landlord later that had happened, or that and were they even aware of it?
We had brought up some things again, like we'd heard footsteps and the scratching in the walls, and so we were after some time we brought it up to his attention. Hey, we're hearing footsteps. Hey, we're hearing scratching in the wall. but it just seemed to stop every time he would come over. So it almost discredited us. So in the sense that even if I would have said, "Hey, this house is haunted," I don't know, I don't know if he would have believed me or if he would have said that he believed me.
Interesting. Now, getting back to this experience we just talked about, which sounds like pretty frightening. Was it just a complete memory blackout for you when that happened? How did that happen for you afterwards? Did you have any memory or recollection of this kind of what you termed in the book as a possession event?
No, I had no recollection of it. Again, I had the strong urge to go to the basement and look for something that would not have normally been in the basement. So I totally blacked out and I did not recall it. Again, that's just, I'm going off of what my wife said to me. This is what happened. This is what I walked home to. This is what you said to me, and in a very strange voice that was not yours.
Wow. Yeah, that's frightening stuff. Now, thinking back, was there anything remotely like that experience that had happened? I mean, you had all of these years of paranormal experiences. Was there even anything remotely like that that had happened before you had this experience?
No, I've never had any kind of, spirit or ghost, whatever, come through my physical body. So that's why it was so frightening, for me to hear that. And other than, I mentioned claiming, the evil spirit and seeing, a mask floating and speaking to me. But I've never had anything actually, it come through my physical body. So that was very, very alarming to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I can only imagine after hearing that and trying to kind of make sense of some kind of situation that happened like that would be difficult. And I'm just wondering, so you made the decision to leave the house. You guys moved into a different residence. Did anything else happen much after that? I mean, did the activity pretty much subside after that, or kind of give us a sense of what happened after moving out of that place?
So I can remember the day we left and we packed up and we were leaving. I looked back at the house and I could actually see a dark figure standing in the window, and it disturbed me. And for several days after that, I had dreams about the house and going back to the house and not being able to escape that house. It was very frightening. The dreams, I would be lost and the house would keep popping up, and then the porch light would come on and the door would open, and it was almost as if it was inviting me back, and and then a figure would appear and say, "You'll always end up here." And for day, I mean, it really bothered me for days after moving out. But and I still have those dreams occasionally about that house. But all in all, it pretty much subsided quickly after moving out.
Wow, interesting. Now you've had some success with the book. And you did mention that, other people who may be having these experiences, they can always reach out to you, talk with you. Have you had others now since you've published the book? I know it's only been out for a little less than a month now. Has anybody reached out to you and shared their experiences and wanted to kind of, console with you and talk about their experiences?
I'm glad you brought that up, Curry. I've had a lot of folks reach out to me. A lot of folks in my close circle of family and friends that who always appeared as skeptics and things like that. Have reached out and said, "Hey, Nate, I want to tell you something. After reading your book, I want you to know that I've actually had paranormal experiences, throughout my entire life. I've just never told anyone as well."
They were perhaps afraid to talk about it before, you think?
I think so, and that's a big takeaway. I want folks to realize that there's others out there that are having these experiences. You're not the only one. You're not alone, and it's okay to talk about it. Sometimes we feel embarrassed or that we might be shamed or frowned upon, but it's okay to get it off your chest, and it's okay to talk about it. And it's happening to other people, and it's very real.
Well, and that's a good, it just brought up a point that I wanted to make here too. And that is that, we already talked about, how the paranormal has really kind of blossomed since, you can take there are negative takeaways from, Hollywood, doing paranormal shows on TV, and, they're trying to get ratings. And, it seems a lot of these shows that something's always happening, and some of them are always dark and demonic kind of spin on the activity going on. But to the positive side of that, there's been a lot of groups who have formed as a result of this openness into the paranormal. You find a lot of paranormal groups out there. More and more people are open to exploring this stuff. And so, if there's somebody out there you said, you're not alone, they're having experiences with this stuff, just get on the internet and start doing searches. You'll find paranormal groups out there. They're all over the place. There's thousands of them. And, there's always someone to reach out to. I mean, it's easy to, and, I would caution and say you have to be careful who you are reaching out to. And you kind of, you do some research on who it is. But there are groups out there that are more than willing to come in and take a look at if you have activity going on in your home, things going on that you can't kind of come to grips with on your own. There's so many other people out there that may be willing to come in and help, and maybe, even come in if you wanted to call on a group to come in and see what they find out at your location. There's just so much of that now to draw on. And so many groups out there that are willing to come in free of charge and come in and investigate and see what may be going on there. So, yeah, I think in that sense, Nate, I think it's really opened up, and I think that's been a positive side of, all of this stuff on TV. I worked with a paranormal group for several years myself. I kind of came in as a skeptic initially, but I think my views have kind of changed. I had experiences myself, but there's a lot of people out there that are probably having experiences similar to yours. And so, just a word of encouragement to anybody out there who may be having these experiences. It's so much easier to reach out to people nowadays and to get help.
Yes,
So.
absolutely, absolutely, and do it. Don't suffer in silence and think you're crazy. That, like you said, Cray. There's so many groups out there. Reach out, reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure there's still a lot of people deal with that fear aspect even nowadays. Of if I share this, what are people going to think? Are they going to criticize me? Are they going to ask me to go see a doctor?
Exactly.
This sort of thing. But, there's so many different outlets there to reach out to. So, hopefully that's an encouraging message for any listeners out there who may be having experiences that they don't know how to deal with. Any other tips or advice for people maybe experiencing this kind of activity, Nate?
Yeah, promote positivity, promote love. Certain beings, these darker entities, if you will, they are drawn and attracted to negative situations and negative behaviors. So, if you are experiencing paranormal, try to be as positive as you can and be loving to those around you. And, those entities they may see that they're not affecting you and they may go away.
Yeah, that's a good point. I always kind of had this theory. I've never really experienced anything I would say was, in the demonic realm, not even anything close to that. In fact, a lot of the experiences I had as an investigator were really on the positive side. And I always, you touch on an important point here. I think, perhaps there's something to the kind of energy you bring.
Yes.
If you come into a location fearful, frightened, perhaps that's the kind of energy you're going to bring,
Yes,
or you're
absolutely.
going to invite. So, yeah, I think you touched on something very important here, and that is, be the kind of energy you want to attract to yourself. I don't know, call it the law of attraction.
Yes, yes.
Call it whatever you will. But I think the kind of energy we bring to the table kind of invites whatever kind of energy we get in return. I do very much believe that is the case. I think you touched on something really important there. Nate, it's been an intriguing discussion. Really appreciate you joining me tonight. Now, where can people find the book and anything else they want to find out more about you and your story?
So you can get the book on my website, morehaunted.com. It is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Again, you can reach out to me on my website. I have my contact information there. So, and don't be afraid to reach out. I've talked to people all day long, and I would be happy to talk to anyone who's read the book. So, yeah, check it out. Morehaunted.com, Amazon, Barnes and Noble.
Hey, Nate, thanks again for sharing your story. I'm looking forward to delving into the book a little bit more and some more of those stories. Congratulations on your success on the book. I know it hasn't been out that long, but sounds like you've already had some success with the book. Best of luck in all your future endeavors, and your any paranormal pursuits you might be involved in. And yeah, once again, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
Thank you, and I really appreciate it. It's been an honor, Curry, and thank you to all the listeners out there.
All right, have a great night, Nate.